very serious business we're engaged in here. The strength of his comments, the method of delivery, and the content are indicative of the serious challenges we're facing. For example, under the budget that was submitted to us, the only budget we've seen so far from the President, the interest on our debt, according to the Congressional Budget Office, who took their 10-year budget and calculated it out, calculated that we're paying about $240 billion in interest today on our debt. In the 10th year of President Obama's budget, as you said, Senator Cornyn, interest would crowd out other things. It would be $940 billion. 1 year's interest. When we borrow money, we pay interest just like individuals do when they borrow money. And we're borrowing so much money that we're doubling the debt again in our country in 10 years. The interest on it will crowd out other things. For example, it would be more than Social Security, more than our Medicare, more than our Defense Department spending in that year. So I thank you for sharing that. I see my friend Senator Johnson wanted to make a consent request, and we'll be pleased to yield at this time.
Mr. President.
The Senator from South Dakota.
I ask unanimous consent that Michael Barry Raymond, an intern with the Senate Appropriations Committee, be granted privileges during consideration of H.R. 2055.
Without objection.
I thank the Senator for his courtesy. I yield the floor and reserve the balance of my time.
Mr. President, just a wrap up here, and I'll close at 2. I understand under our agreement that 2 o'clock will be the time allocated for the Democratic speakers as they may appear, and that there would be time at 3 o'clock for under my control for the Republican for Republican speakers at that time.
That is the understanding, although I'm told that the agreement has not been formalized as yet, but I do understand that's the agreement. Senator from Alabama is correct.
That is all right.
Wrap up and ask consent that there be 30 minutes under my control at 3 p.m.
Is there objection? Hearing none, without objection.
I thank the Chair. Well, the fundamental problem is that our Democratic leadership have decided it would be foolish to have a budget. Leadership have decided it would be foolish to have a budget, even though it's required by law. They refuse to produce a budget now for 806 days, over 2 years. Last year, Senator Conrad produced a budget in committee, and he was voted on and brought to the floor, but the majority leader refused to even bring it up for debate and vote. This year, I suppose it was that the majority leader decided we wouldn't even have one in committee. So we've not commenced any action to pass a budget. But now we're proceeding to spend money. We're proceeding to pass legislation that would expend taxpayers' money without a budget. And that's not good policy by any standards, whether you have a law or not, but we actually have a law that requires us to have a budget first. And that's why I found myself having to raise a budget point of order. So, Mr. President, we weren't elected here to shut down the committees, to violate the congressional process of deciding how money should be spent, to cede our constitutional responsibility to some secret meeting somewhere so they can produce some sort of bill and drop it in the Senate on August 1st, presumably, and then demand that we pay for it. Because, look, you've got to look behind the numbers. Just because the President says his budget does one thing, his plan does another thing, don't you think we ought to check it out? One of the most stunning statements I've ever heard from a president and from the budget director was heard early this year after the President presented his budget. He and the budget director, publicly and in committee, and the budget director in committee, said that our budget will have us live within our means and pay down the debt. They used those words. So anybody hearing that think, gosh, I'm glad the President produced a budget that will have us live within our means and pay down our debt. You know, we've been spending too much money. And what's the truth? The truth is the lowest single annual deficit in 10 years, according to the Congressional Budget Office analysts, would be $740 billion. The highest President Bush ever had was $450, and that was too high. This year it would be $1,500 billion. So, and I would point out that in the out years, that $740 billion was about year 6. The 7, 8, 9, 10, the numbers are going up again, and CBO says the 10th year, the deficit under the President's budget will be $1,200 billion, $1.2 trillion. So this is not good. We need to get our house in order. We're going to insist that we do it in the right way, and that's why I've objected to proceeding to spending bills without a budget. And time for the majority leader to bring us into session. Let's have a budget. Let's see where people stand. Let's make the tough decisions. Let's vote on it. Let's allow ourselves to be held accountable by the people who sent us here. Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I appreciated hearing my colleagues talking about the seriousness of the situation that we're in, because I think there is one thing that every single member of this body agrees on, and that is that we have to address the long-term debt and deficits of the country. And like many members of this chamber, I've repeatedly called for a bipartisan package that includes reforms to everything that's deficit-related. So that means cuts in spending, domestic, discretionary and non-discretionary. That means defense, and it means mandatory programs. But it also means increased revenue. And I have supported attaching deficit reduction measures to the vote on the debt limit. And I believe that reducing the deficit is critical to strengthening the long-term health of our economy. But I also believe, Mr. President, that everyone, and that means everyone, has to come to the table to find a compromise solution that will get this done. I think Democrats know this. That's why time and time again we've offered compromise plans, including more than $1 trillion in spending cuts. But it's disappointing that politics are keeping some in this chamber and in the Congress from negotiating in good faith. That's a real disservice to the American people. I've spoken before about what some people are trying to protect: tax breaks for big oil, for hedge fund operators, and for yacht owners. But I'd like to speak today about what some are willing to risk to protect those tax giveaways, and what happens if we don't increase the debt limit and meet the United States' financial obligations. First of all, raising the debt limit does not mean spending more. Our spending is set by Congress every year in our annual budget process. Raising the debt limit means paying the government's bills. Our government, the government that all of us are part of, and not just members of Congress, but every man, woman, and child throughout this country. It's not the Democrats' government, and it's not President Obama's government, and it's not the Republicans' government. It belongs to all of us. And we're talking about servicing savings bonds that have been issued under President Reagan, about supporting an army that was first sent to Afghanistan under President Bush, about paying Social Security checks and for food inspectors and air traffic controllers. The discussion we're having now is about the full faith and credit of the United States government. Failure to raise the debt limit means default. It means that the United States would not meet its obligations for the first time in our history. And what would happen? Well, Warren Buffett said, and I quote, "It would, for Congress, be the most asinine act ever." Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke said it would lead to, quote, "a huge financial calamity." Economist and former Reagan advisor Larry Kudlow said default would be catastrophic. The biggest concern these experts name is the potential for a global financial crisis. Companies, pension funds, and governments across the world hold U.S. savings bonds. A default could trigger a crisis worse than the one in 2008. And in fact, we just heard from Secretary Geithner a few minutes ago, it would be worse than the crisis of 2008, which itself triggered the worst recession since the Great Depression. We're just now climbing out of that hole caused by the last financial crisis. We cannot risk another one. I want to read from a letter that was sent to Congress earlier this week by hundreds of America's top businesses and business organizations, including the Chamber of Commerce, the Financial Services Roundtable, and some great New Hampshire companies like Sertronics and Control Air. And I'm quoting, "We believe it is vitally important for the U.S. government to make good on its financial obligations. It is critical that the U.S. government not default in any way on its fiscal obligations. A great nation, like a great company, has to be relied on to pay its bills, to pay its debts when they become due." And I'm still quoting, "This is a Main Street, not Wall Street issue. Treasury securities influence the cost of financing not just for companies, but more importantly for mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, and student debt. A default would risk both disarray in those markets and a host of unintended consequences. The debt ceiling trigger does offer a needed catalyst for serious negotiations on budget discipline, but avoiding even a technical default is essential. This is a risk our country must not take." End quote. Again, this isn't my opinion. This is the opinion of our nation's business leaders. I hope we're going to listen to them. In a recent op-ed in USA Today, the Chamber and the Financial Services Forum spelled out why they believe a default would result in, quote, "hundreds of thousands of lost jobs every year." First, they point out that a default would halt critical government operations far more abruptly than we've seen in past standoffs over the budget. So that means worse than in 1995 when government shut down. They say, quote, "The U.S. Treasury is expected to take in about $100 billion in tax revenue in August, but needs to pay $300 billion in expenses. The resulting $130 billion deficit would require the government to pick which programs, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, unemployment insurance, to pay for and which not to fund. And there would be little money left to pay our troops or to run our courts, the prison system, the FBI, or other essential operations. They go on to note that default would make our government debt and deficit problem worse. Yesterday, Moody's, the credit rating agency, put the United States government's credit rating under review. If Moody's were to downgrade our credit rating, investor confidence in U.S. bonds would be shaken, and it would be more expensive for our government to borrow money. This is something that I understand viscerally, because as governor of New Hampshire, we work closely to try and avoid the rating agencies downgrading the state's borrowing so that we would have to pay more money. J.P. Morgan estimates that the higher interest rates caused by default could increase our annual deficits by a staggering $75 billion a year, just from higher interest rates. If we're really serious about reducing the deficit, this is the wrong way to go. And that's why we need to find a compromise solution. We've done that in the past. The debt limit has gone up under every president in modern times, and I think this list is instructive. It shows that President Nixon raised it 9 times for a total increase of $130 billion and 36% of the cost. President Clinton raised it 4 times. See that? And the cost and the percent of spending. Since President Kennedy, the most frequent and largest increases came under President Reagan. 18 increases, 199% total increase. I don't think anybody here thinks that President Reagan was a champion of big government, or that if he didn't have to raise the debt limit in order to address what he had to do as president, that he would have raised it. This is not a question about the option of raising our debt limit. It's a question of raising our debt limit or catastrophe is going to occur. And I believe that many of our colleagues, Mr. President, on both sides of the aisle, understand the importance of getting this done. I believe that many of them believe in the value of compromise. We all have to be at the table. We all have to be ready to compromise to reach a solution. I urge my colleagues to do what's right, for us all to put politics aside for the good of the economy and the good of the country. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator from Iowa.
Mr. President, first I ask unanimous consent that Jordana Signer, Eddie Sahik, and Tyler Smith of my staff be granted 4 privileges for the duration of today's proceedings.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'd like to follow up a little bit on what the Senator from New Hampshire just spoke about, and that is the absurdity, the absolute absurdity of what's going on in Washington today. Mr. President, our nation used to have a 2-party system in this country, but it's increasingly apparent that one of our 2 parties has morphed into some kind of a quasi-religion driven by one ideology, preserving and expanding tax breaks for the wealthy and for big corporations. To that end, many Republicans in Congress are perfectly willing to push the United States of America into defaulting on its debt obligations with dire economic consequences. This is a very dangerous detour in our nation's political and economic life. But just as dangerous as the prospect of a default on our debt obligations is the Republicans' determination to defund and dismantle as much of the federal government as possible. To that end, they're demanding deep, draconian cuts to federal funding and investment at a time when unemployment is already sky high and rising and when our economy remains fragile. To justify these deep cuts, Republicans, with this new ideology that they have articulated an absurd economic theory. Absolutely absurd. They claim that slashing federal funding and investments by trillions of dollars will somehow magically create jobs. I don't know of any mainstream economist, anyone with an ounce of common sense, who agrees with this bizarre theory. To the contrary, economists warn us this is absolutely the wrong time to be slashing federal investment. Well, for the obvious reason that deep, short-term cuts to federal spending will dramatically reduce demand in the economy, thus reducing employment even further. Already this year, cuts to government spending at the state and local levels have destroyed an estimated 500,000 public sector jobs. And that goes along with an undetermined number of private sector jobs that work with these public sectors. Economists understand that terminating the jobs of teachers, police officers, other essential public employees has the same negative impact on the economy as eliminating private sector jobs. Now, nonetheless, as if they live in some kind of a parallel upside-down universe, Republicans insist that slashing federal funding and investment will create jobs. Well, let's test that theory. Let's test that theory in just one area of federal investment. Let's take transportation funding. Everybody understands that our transportation infrastructure is woefully inadequate. It's in a state of increasing disrepair, overloaded. Most people understand that ramping up investments in modernizing our highways and bridges and public transit systems would strengthen our economy, create millions of jobs. These are the veins and the arteries of our commerce. So what have the Republicans in the House proposed? Last week, Republican leaders put forward a new transportation authorization bill that would slash current investments in transportation by more than one-third. One-third. One-third cut in transportation. So will this create jobs, as the Republicans claim? Of course not. The Senate Environment and Public Works Committee estimates that the House bill would destroy more than 490,000 highway construction jobs and close to 100,000 transit-related and mass transit. So, Mr. President, this is pure folly. This is a classic example of what happens when ideological obsessions cause members of Congress to be blind to practical, common-sense realities. I have repeatedly come to the floor to advocate for a balanced approach to bringing our deficits under control, one that includes both some spending cuts and revenue increases. At the same time, economists warn us that we need a deficit reduction plan that defers the lion's share of spending cuts for several years, allowing our economy to recover before the negative impacts are felt. I must also ask, Mr. President, why are we proposing to slash all these fundings for highways and schools and infrastructure here at home while we continue to spend untold billions of dollars to build highways, schools, and infrastructure in Afghanistan? A lot of times people ask me, they say, okay, Senator Harkin, you say you're willing to cut spending where? Well, right here. Let's start right here. Let's start with Afghanistan and Iraq. We're spending $168 billion in Iraq and Afghanistan this year alone. $168 billion. This year, fiscal year 2011, we're spending more than $13 billion to train the Iraqi and Afghan security forces. $13 billion. Okay? What did we spend here in America to retrain our workers so they can get new jobs? Less than $10 billion. We're spending more money to train Afghan and Iraqi forces, security forces, than we're spending to retrain our own workers all over America. 24 million Americans, unemployed or underemployed, and yet we're spending $168 billion this year on Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, again, I applaud the President for the actions he's taken, but quite frankly, Mr. President, they don't go far enough. The President should have a faster timetable for our troops to get out of Afghanistan. I've said that publicly many times. So if you really want to save some money, save that $1 million that it costs to keep one soldier in Afghanistan and get them back here. You know, we went to Afghanistan to get the Taliban out, get al-Qaeda out, and to get Osama bin Laden. Well, we got Osama bin Laden, al-Qaeda is no longer in Afghanistan, and the Taliban's gone. So what are we still doing there? Why are we still there? Why are we still spending about $14 billion a month in Afghanistan? So, Mr. President, again, we need a balanced approach. Spending cuts alone won't do the job. I think the Republicans have just proved this. The Republicans have proved that spending cuts alone will not get the job done. How do I say that? Because look at the Republican budget, the so-called Ryan budget. It dismantles Medicare, guts Medicaid, makes severe cuts across the federal budget, yet it still adds trillions of dollars to the deficit for years to come, largely because it refuses to touch tax breaks for the well-to-do or to raise other revenues from corporations. Well, Mr. President, the Republicans have said they don't want to raise taxes on so-called job creators. They don't want to raise taxes on job creators. Well, to call trust fund millionaires and Wall Street money manipulators job creators is laughable. Meanwhile, to call many large corporations in the United States job creators is increasingly questionable. In one respect, actually, you can argue that America's big brand name corporations, GE, Microsoft, and so on, are, quote, job creators. Problem is, they're not creating jobs here. They're creating them overseas and eliminating them here. U.S. Commerce Department data shows that during the 2000s, U.S. companies, multinational companies, cut their workforces here at home by 2.9 million. 2.9 million, and increased their workforces overseas by 2.4 million. Yeah, they're creating jobs, all right. They're just not creating them here in America. And to add insult to injury, there are provisions in the U.S. tax code that promote this kind of behavior. The kind of tax breaks that Republicans insist on preserving. So they don't want to tax job creators. And yet we've shown, the data is there, these big multinationals are creating the jobs overseas. We would like to, I would like to, I'm sure the occupant of the chair would like to, close some of those loopholes so there's not a tax benefit to shipping your jobs overseas. Republicans say no. They don't want to do that. In the month of May, the U.S. trade deficit soared to more than $50 billion, the highest level in nearly 3 years. Just 1 month. 1 month. And the trade deficit, that $50 billion, just for one country, was half of that, China, $25 billion trade deficit. Now those figures, you might say, what does that mean? Well, those figures represent a transfer of millions of jobs and billions in wages from the United States to China or to other countries abroad. We need to seriously examine our trade policies also, which continually send jobs and wages overseas. We need to stop bowing before the sacrosanct altar of, quote, free trade, as if it doesn't even warrant our examination. Instead, we need to ask how we can make our trade policies work for the middle class. For instance, by defending America's right to oppose currency manipulation and abusive trade practices. Just one area alone. We ought to start talking about fair trade, fair trade, fair trade. Not free trade, free trade, free trade. Because you see where free trade gets us if we don't stand up to other countries who manipulate their currencies, like China, and to whom we're shipping all our jobs and our money. So, Mr. President, as I've said, our economy, I think, is at the point of maximum danger. This Congress is at an historic decision point with regard to raising the debt ceiling and bringing deficits under control. However, as we've seen played out in the press, in the media, standing in the way of a rational, reasonable compromise, are congressional Republicans' ideological obsession with preserving tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires at any and all costs. They have rejected the President's deficit reduction plan that was $4 trillion. He went over halfway. They rejected that. Now they're threatening to force us to default on the national debt. And I'll just close on this, Mr. President. I heard our distinguished minority leader, the senator from Kentucky, said that this was now Obama's economy. And the problems we have is because of Obama. Because he's been there almost 3 years, 2.5 years now. So therefore he owns it. You know, this is really a kind of an interesting world we're living in. We have a debt ceiling. And why has the debt gone up? The debt's gone up because we've borrowed money. We've borrowed a lot of money. The Congressional Budget Office says that the debt that we have today comes from, number one, now remember, 10 years ago right now, we had a surplus, a budget surplus, one of the largest in our nation's history, left thanks to President Clinton. Well, then President Bush comes into office, Republicans take over the House, Republicans take over the Senate. What do? They ram through a massive tax cut. Takes those surpluses and gives them mostly to the wealthy in our country. And then 9/11 happens and we enter into 2 wars totally unpaid for. Just borrow it. Borrow it from China, borrow it from wherever, borrow the money to pay for 2 wars. Then we had a Medicare drug prescription benefit, most of which benefits, by the way, go to the drug companies. And we didn't pay for that. We borrowed money for that also. And so the debt that we have today that we're grappling with is because of policies enacted by a Republican president and a Republican Congress. So they ran up the debt. Now they don't want to pay for it. This is not President Obama's debt. Not at all. This is what happens when you have almost 8, 9 years of uninterrupted borrowing and spending by President Bush and a Republican Congress. Well, this is their debt. And again, I call upon Republicans, reasonable, responsible Republicans, to come forward and give up on this ideological obsession that they have, this new theology that says no tax reform, no raising of revenues from anyone, even those that can afford it the most. Well, Mr. President, I still remain an optimist. It's not too late for reason to prevail. We've heard loudly and clearly from the extremists and the ideologues who would bring down our economic house rather than agree to any compromise. Now it's time for decent, patriotic Americans to speak up and say enough. We can and must come together around a balanced plan to bring our deficits under control, and we must uphold the full faith and credit of the United States of America. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor. And I note the absence of a vote.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
Senator from Delaware.
I ask unanimous consent that proceedings under the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today, as have so many other senators, because I'm concerned. I'm concerned about what I've been hearing, about the threat of default that is now just over 3 weeks away. What I've heard both here in Washington and in my home state of Delaware. This looming default crisis is one of the most grave and most predictable threats to our economy and our country that I've ever seen. And it's no longer floating at a distance over the horizon, something we can debate academically, something whose impact we may yet avert. It is here. We are on the edge. We are, given the difficulties this body can have in moving something through in a matter of days, we are very close to the absolute last day when we can consider options and a path forward. Default is right before us, and it must be dealt with. I rise today not to add to the political rhetoric. There's certainly been plenty of that in the last few days, nor do I rise to try and elicit panic or fear in the broader public. I rise because the folks of Delaware, the people from whom I've been hearing, just don't know what to believe. They know our deficit spending, they know our national debt are out of control, and they're deeply concerned. That's good. I share that concern. I share that commitment to making certain that we reduce our spending and we deal with our deficits. Because deficits and debt at the size we have today can harm our economy fundamentally. They are a basic challenge to our national security, to our success, to our growth going forward. But I also rise because there is no faster way to ensure that our economy will never get back on track, that our country will never reach its full potential, than to let our nation default on its financial obligations. We need to deal with this default crisis, Mr. President, in a responsible and pragmatic way to create a real and lasting solution. We must, in my view, restore certainty to our markets to help get our economy going again. What do we hear from business, from businessmen large and small all over the country? Certainty. We need predictability. We need certainty in the markets. Well, nothing is creating uncertainty more than this grinding lack of resolution to the vote to raise our nation's debt ceiling. Mr. President, I'd like to take a few moments, if I could, about the reality of this impending crisis. And I want to take a look at a few of the myths that I hear at home that I think need to be cleared up. First, some members of this body and the other House of Congress, some folks running for president, some people in the press, have suggested that a default will cause only minor economic disruption, if any at all. Economist after economist, think tank after think tank, study after study have shown in the last few weeks that nothing could be further from the truth. There are predictable consequences of default that will affect every American, Americans in every state of every income level. And more than any, I worry about the working families or those currently out of work who are already struggling through the greatest recession we've known in my lifetime. One report suggests 640,000 people will lose their jobs in the months after default. Economists confirm that the cost of home mortgages, of car loans, of interest rates will go up for everything. The cost of food, of gas, of everyday items for families all over this country will go up in real and concrete ways. And more importantly, if we default on America's mortgage, the impact in terms of the increased cost of borrowing for our whole country and for all of our families won't just be brief, it'll be lasting, because it will hang with us on our credit score as a nation for years. To the folks watching, if you think it's difficult to find a job or to help grow a business, to help deal with the daily cost of living now, just wait until we default on America's mortgage. And the cost of borrowing funds to do anything, to create new jobs or to help pay your bills as a family goes up. Default will have real and lasting economic consequences that will haunt this economy and haunt the working families of this nation for years. The second myth, Mr. President, is that we can just stop spending money without real consequences. Some in this very chamber have suggested that when we get to August, there's still plenty of money coming in to service the debt, so there is no real threat of default. And what we need to do is a relatively simple exercise of just deciding which things we will stop paying. The second myth goes that the Treasury Department will just start picking winners and losers. They will pay Social Security but forego Medicare. They'll pay our troops but pink slip our federal civilians. They'll fund the Pentagon but forget the Department of Education. Never mind the ethical quandaries, the long-term disservice such action would have on our economy and our country. Frankly, the truth is it's also not even clear they have the legal authority to do so in the Treasury Department, to pick these winners and losers on a week-by-week basis. To just choose one example of the studies that have been done on this myth, that we can simply pay the debt service and a few big things and the consequences of the rest would be fine. According to the Bipartisan Policy Center, beginning in August, if we continue to make payments, obviously on interest on the debt, but also on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all defense contractors, and unemployment insurance, so the really important things, and we just stop paying the rest, our troops on active duty, all of our veterans programs, all of law enforcement, including, for example, the FBI, the whole federal court system, the FAA, which monitors air traffic, the FDA, which inspects food quality and safety, and a host of dozens and dozens of other federal programs would come to a halt within days. So the consequences to the safety of our families, to the strength of our economy, to the confidence of our country, to our role at home and abroad would, in my view, be tragic, almost catastrophic. So even if we could avoid technically default for a few days or weeks by continuing to service our debt, the costs and consequences of these other easy choices would be dramatic, difficult, and lasting. According to Steve McMillan, who was recently quoted on this topic, the former OMB deputy director under President Bush, he said, "I would say the options Treasury has, if the debt limit is not raised, are all very ugly." Let me give you a third myth. As I was talking with some small business owners in Delaware over the past week, some suggested that they really felt we needed to go ahead, take the tough medicine of defaulting, and cut up the president's credit card, stop the president from spending. And while I share their concerns about the very real and very significant threat posed by our deep deficits, and share the view that we must cut spending, as all of us who are Democrats on the Budget Committee have said now publicly, we're committed to a balanced approach that significantly cuts federal spending. The metaphor of cutting up the credit cards is wrong. Not just wrong, it's desperately wrong and misleading. Our nation defaulting on its debt is not like cutting up the credit cards and stopping the future spending. It's much more like defaulting on a mortgage. It hurts our credit rating and hinders our ability to borrow. As we've been told before, every 1% increase in interest rates will cause our national debt to go up $1.3 trillion over 10 years. And according to some economists, increased interest rates could last for a decade or more. No, the obligations that come due August 2nd are the obligations that have already been undertaken. As Senator Harkin said before me, it is Republican presidents, it is Republicans, both President and Congress, Democrats, both President and Congress over the last decade, who have moved us into a bigger house as a country. It is the cost of 2 wars, the cost of an expanded Medicare Part D, the cost of expanded investment in our country, the cost of this bigger house that is now coming due. And for us to stop paying that mortgage would have the same consequences for our country as it would for any family. Because when you default on your mortgage, it's not like cutting up a credit card. It affects your credit rating. It affects your ability to borrow. It affects your ability to do anything more for your family for years to come. So, too, would the consequences be for this country. And in my view, we can't afford to let our country become a bad investment. Last, some have suggested that August 2nd is not a serious deadline, that somehow Secretary Geithner must have some other rabbit in the hat or some escape hatch. Back in January, Secretary Geithner sent a letter to all of us in Congress suggesting we would, in fact, run out of money on May 16th. And the government, the Treasury Department, would then have to start taking extraordinary measures to avoid default. In fact, he detailed in 6 pages all the extraordinary measures that would be required. And he was right, almost literally to the day, about when that transition occurred and when those extraordinary measures needed to be deployed. The time runs out August 2nd. But if you don't believe the deadlines for some reason presented to us by our very own Secretary of the Treasury and the Treasury Department, just look at what the 3 bond rating agencies are already saying about the impending default. Moody's, S&P, and Fitch have all threatened to downgrade America's rating. From AAA, the most secure, most stable in the world, S&P suggested last week, to D, to junk bond status. Mr. President, I suggest America is not a junk bond nation. It puts us at risk as a nation, as a people, as an economy, when we are mentioned in the same sentences as Ireland, as Greece, as Italy, as countries currently wrestling with fundamental failures to meet their obligations as a country. And we are better than that. All of us in this chamber, all of us, Mr. President, are challenged to come together and to put our economy and our country back on solid footing, to restore certainty to the markets, to give confidence to retirees, to families, to parents raising children, to small businesses, by getting serious about putting a plan on this floor next week and passing it. Because, frankly, if we allow this country to default on its sovereign debt, to fail to meet its moral commitments, both financial and to the people of the United States, the consequences will be desperate and lasting. Mr. President, I suggested a few weeks ago that we should consider seriously the Bipartisan Policy Commission's proposal, so-called SAVE-GO, which would pick up where the pay-as-you-go discipline of the 90s started and modernize it for our current situation. If we cannot get a comprehensive $4 trillion balance deal together to this floor and passed, let us at least get a down payment and enforce a budget mechanism that would ensure that comprehensive deal is accomplished over the next decade. SAVE-GO, which I recommend to everyone in this body, would lock in savings over the next decade, force both parties to stay at the table, and urge us to meet the targets that we all know we need to meet, to reduce our deficits, to stabilize our debt, to strengthen our country, and to move past this tragic, narrow debate over August 2nd and our nation's mortgage. We need, Mr. President, to focus not on the next election cycle, not on the partisan back and forth that might win one party over another, one person over another advantage in this chamber or the other for 2012, but we need instead to focus on the next generation, on the future. The only way forward, in my view, is to honor our moral commitments as a nation to the men and women who rely on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, on the safety of our troops, and on the investments we make in the future, and to continue to honor our obligations as a nation. To do anything less is to dishonor the sacrifice of those who've served us in the past and to ignore the very real needs of the working families all over this country who look to us for leadership and sacrifice to put us on a sustainable path forward. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we are at a pivotal moment in American history, and I think many Americans are confused and perplexed and angry and frustrated as to where we are today and how we got to where we are and what the consequences of decisions made in the past or being made right now will mean to their families. Let me just take a minute to try to give you my view as to how we got to where we are and what our options are. As you have just stated, Mr. President, and Senator Harkin before you, anyone who talks blithely about default and saying it is not a big deal for this country clearly does not understand what he or she is talking about. This is the greatest nation in the history of the world. This is a nation whose faith and credit has been the gold standard of countries throughout the world. This is a nation since George Washington which has paid out every nickel that it has borrowed, which is in fact why it is the great nation that it is and why we have the strongest economy in the world today, troubled though it may be. The idea for some people to simply say, oh, not a big deal, we're not going to pay our debt, nothing to really worry about, those are people who are wishing our economy harm for political reasons, and those are people whose attitudes will have terrible consequences for virtually every working family in this country in terms of higher interest rates, in terms of significant job loss, in terms of making a very unstable global economy even more unstable. This country, which has paid its debts from day one, must pay its debts, and I can't say it any more clearly than that. Now, our Republican friends, especially our right-wing friends who now control the House of Representatives, they have given us an option. And here's their option. What they have said is, we want to do deficit reduction, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to end Medicare as we know it and force elderly people, many of whom who don't have the money, to pay substantially more for their health care. So when you're 70 under their plan and you get sick and you don't have a whole lot of income, we don't know what happens to you. They forgot to tell us. But what they did tell us is Medicare is not going to be there for you. And they told us that tomorrow, if their plan was passed, you're going to have to pay a heck of a lot more for the prescription drugs you're getting today. Oh, you don't have the money. Hey, that's not our problem. And they told us we're going to make savage cuts in Medicaid, throw millions of kids off of health insurance when 50 million Americans have no health insurance today. They want millions more without any health insurance. And if your mom or dad is in a nursing home and that nursing home bill is paid significantly by Medicaid, and Medicaid isn't paying anymore, they forgot to tell us. What happens to your mom or dad in that nursing home? What happens? And what happens today if you are unemployed and you're not able to get unemployment extension? What happens if you're a middle-class family desperately trying to send your kids to college and you make savage cuts in Pell Grants and you can't go to college? What does it mean for the nation if we are not bringing forth young people who have the education that they need? They forgot to tell us that. And if one of the growing numbers of senior citizens in this country who are going hungry, they want to cut nutrition programs. And on it goes. Every program that has any significance to working families, the sick, the elderly, children, the poor, they're going to cut. And they're going to cut in a savage way. And they're going to do that in the midst of a recession where real unemployment is already at 15% and the middle class is disappearing and poverty is increasing. That's their idea. And then when you say to them, well, hey, the very, very rich are doing phenomenally well. The top 1% now earns more income than the bottom 50%. The top 400 wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. Don't you think maybe it's appropriate that when the rich are getting richer and their tax rates have gone down, their effective tax rates are the lowest in modern history, when major corporations are making billions in profits, in some cases not paying a nickel in taxes, don't you think maybe it's fair that they contribute to deficit reduction rather than just the elderly and the sick and working families? And they say, no, we've got a line in the sand, and if it means this country will default on its debt for the first time in history, that's okay. But we are absolutely going to defend the richest people in this country, millionaires and billionaires, and make sure they don't pay a nickel more in taxes. We're going to make sure there is no tax reform so that we can continue to lose $100 billion every single year because wealthy people and corporations stash their money in tax havens in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda, and that's just fine. We'll protect those tax breaks while we savage programs for working families. Those are the choices that our right-wing Republican friends are giving us. Defaults with horrendous economic consequences for working families in this country and, in fact, for the entire global economy, or massive cuts to programs that working families desperately need. Well, you know what, Mr. President? Neither of those options are acceptable to me, and neither are those options acceptable to the vast majority of the people in this country. Every single poll that I have seen says that the American people want shared sacrifice. They don't want or believe that deficit reduction can simply come down on the backs of the weak and the vulnerable, the elderly, the children, and the poor. That the wealthy and large corporations also have to participate. Mr. President, I must also, in all honesty, tell you that I have been disappointed by the President's role in these discussions and some of his ideas. He has brought forth an idea which I categorically reject, that we should make significant cuts in Social Security, that when someone reaches the age of 85, they would lose $1,000 as opposed to what they would otherwise have gotten. This senator is not going to balance our budget on the backs of an 85-year-old person who's earning $14,000 a year. Not with my vote. And this senator does not agree with the President that we raise eligibility age for Medicare from 65 to 67, because I don't know what happens to millions of people who have worked their whole lives, finally reach 65 anticipating Medicare, but it's not going to be there for them. So I very strongly disagree with the President on those initiatives. Mr. President, let me just tell you that elections have consequences, and I think many people now are beginning to catch on to that. It is no secret that our right-wing Republican colleagues did very well in November 2010. They captured the House of Representatives, and now, a year plus later, for the first time in the history of this country, we are on the verge of a default. So I would close by saying to people all over this country is that if you believe that we have got to start investing in America and creating the millions of jobs that this country desperately needs, elections have consequences. And if you believe that we have to address the deficit crisis in a way that is responsible, in a way that asks the wealthy and large corporations also to play a role, in a way, as Senator Harkin mentioned a moment ago, that calls for cuts in defense spending and bringing our troops home as soon as possible from Afghanistan and Iraq, you have got to be involved in the political process. In my view, a group of people in the House whose views represent a small minority of the American people are holding this Congress hostage. And it is time for the American people to stand up and say enough is enough. The function of the United States Congress is to represent all of our people and not just the wealthiest and most powerful. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.